and Aaron will take a look and let us know when we're good.
It's live.
Okay, welcome back. We'll have this portion of our meeting, PAC committee. Call this part of the meeting to order. First, I'll be looking for approval of the minutes of March 22nd, 2022. Moved by Deputy Warden Mitchell. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Musa. All in favor?
Aye.
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 First on the agenda, we have the plan update background paper, WCDD designated properties. John Woodford.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just bring my screen up here. Okay, so this report is in response to a motion from Council directing staff to do a review of the WCDD designations and what zones are placed on. So during your discussion of the FH development agreement application, it came to light that that property is designated WCDD, but it's actually zoned R2. So if you just look at a zoning map, you're not going to know that there's necessarily the option to do a development agreement on that property. So in your discussion, the PAC expressed some concern about that split designation of zoning and requested this review. And so just as a reminder, the difference between a land use designation and zoning. So the land use designation comes from the municipal planning strategy. And for example, there may be more than one zone that's permitted in a designation. So for example, the R1 and R2 zone are both zones that are within a single designation, the established residential neighborhood designation. In some cases, there's only one designation that goes with the zone, but just to kind of clear that up a bit. And generally, the designations are sort of a higher level planning principle. They outline the broad policy or the goals for that area, whereas the zoning comes right down to regulations. What's actually permitted? What can you do with signage? What are the yard setbacks? How high can it be? All that kind of stuff. So those are the differences. And your policy statement in the MPS regarding the WCDD states, meeting the challenges faced by a growing community such as East Hants requires innovation and flexibility. This can be achieved through the comprehensive development district and development agreement process. Through this process, the municipality is able to be more flexible with respect to road standards, architectural design, and other aspects of development. Such agreements also assist in ensuring the creation of quality, livable neighborhoods. The CDD process will also enable the municipality to negotiate and implement urban design principles for large developments. Due to their size, these developments have the potential to shape the character of their communities. Further on in that section of the MPS, there is a policy that indicates council may designate something CDD, but actually zone it elsewhere. And that's the UD 33 policy, where it basically says you're going to leave the zone in place until such time somebody comes forward with a proposal to do a CDD DA. And obviously that leaves them the flexibility to use the underlying zoning if they so choose. So these are the 6 sites in the corridor that are designated CDD, and I'll just quickly go through them. So the first one up here in Shubenacadie, that was designated more than 10 years ago now for a proposed development, Shuby Heights. It was going to be a 500 unit development. The developer has since gone away and sold the land to Spaganagity, who have indicated they will develop it at some point. And there was a development agreement approved there, but it's since been discharged. And that one is designated and zone CDD. The next one is in Milford. And you can see sort of the inset map down here. That's 65 hectares. It's adjacent to the Milford Middle School. And I think the thinking at the time was that because the middle school was there, it might be a good opportunity to develop a residential community around that school. However, there's agriculture and some other rural activities on that property, so the rural use zone was left in place. And then we come to the 2 larger ones in Lance, the Armco site here and the Clayton site here. So both of those are designated end zone CDD, and as you know, they have existing development agreements on them. And then we come down to the FH site here in Elmsdale. That's the one that's zoned R2. Actually, FH doesn't own all of this land. The strip here next to Hemlock is not part of their application, so there will still be a piece of that block of land that's designated CDD but zoned R2 after their application. And then the last one is down here in Enfield, the R2T and R2 property at sort of around the school. That's 25 hectares, and you've got, again, the split zoning between R2T and R2. So we took a look at all 6 of these and concluded that 5 of them we think are still appropriately designated and zoned. Those sites which have the split between the designation and zoning gives those owners the additional flexibility. And again, in the case of Milford, I think the rural use zone better reflects what's currently happening there. And if that zone wasn't there, if somebody wanted to build anything, a barn or a house, they wouldn't be able to if it was zoned CDD. So that rural zoning we think should stay in place. And staff will also, however, come to the conclusion that it would be appropriate to change the Enfield site from the CDD designation. A portion of that property is already developed using the R2T zone, and a portion has an active application to rezone to industrial commercial to enable large-scale development or the Elmsdale lumber expansion. The remaining lands are really too small to enable any kind of significant development as envisioned by the CDD policies. So this is that site in pink here. So as you can see, this is the FH land they did as of right. The new street, Sam Crescent, and an extension of Tyler Street. That's pretty well built out now, so it doesn't really matter that the underlying designation is CDD. They use the zone that was there. And then the Elmsdale lumber application relates to the area up here that they're considering for a biochar facility. And so really all that would be left of this CDD would be this stuff adjacent to McMillan Drive here. So, you know, looking at that, that's not really intent of this designation. It's for larger scale development. So, you know, looking at that, we thought it would be appropriate to change that to typically the designation that would go with the R2 zone would be the established residential neighborhood designation. However, this land up here that's subject to the Elmsdale lumber application, we feel really we should wait until we see what happens with that application. So to conclude, we've looked at those 6 sites in the corridor that are designated CDD and concluded that the designation and zoning is still appropriate for 5 of them. However, that Enfield site we think could be changed, and appropriate land use designations could be applied to those lands as part of the plan update project. So the recommendation is to direct staff to prepare amendments to the MPS that would change the designation of lands in Enfield that are zoned R2T from CDD to that's medium density residential, and change the designation of lands zoned R2 from CDD to established residential neighborhood, except for those lands currently part of the application from Elmsdale Lumber. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. Deputy Warden Mitchell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Question through you to staff. When is the Elmsdale lumber application coming to council or committee?
Through you, Mr. Chair, good question. We did a lot of back and forth with the applicant, and we're waiting for some information from them. So I think it's Debbie's application. She was going to check in with them shortly to find out where they're at with the information that we've asked for.
Okay, that's all for now. I'm just thinking of what I wanted to ask, but I'll let it go. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John, I have a question about the CDD around Cottage Country. What can be done over there? It's everything by development agreement, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it's the exact same principle as the Walkable Comprehensive Development District. So in that case, for councillors that may not be aware, there's something called the Rural Comprehensive Development District, and that's how Cottage Country was developed. There was a large area that was put into that designation and zone, so it's all zoned CDD. So you can't do anything until you actually have a development agreement. You can't get a permit for anything on the CDD zone without a DA.
Thank you.
Councillor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So it's my understanding that a couple of months ago, we requested that this kind of review or to take a look at this zoning was brought up because of the application that is currently in the subdivision next to the mill. Is that correct? That's what brought this on?
No, my understanding was it was the FH application in Elmsdale, when it came to light, that was zoned R2.
Exactly,
As
yeah.
opposed- yeah.
Right, the subdivision next to the lumber mill there. And just the fact that I guess it came to light about the uncertainty of the WCDD zoning as far as what the limits are and what they're allowed to do or what they're not allowed to do, which seemed like there wasn't a lot of limits. That was what was concerning us, I guess, and how this came to light.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, again, my understanding, the motion was to look at where these things were and if they're still appropriate. So that's a review that we did. In terms of the actual policy, like getting into the DA, there's some language in there about the type of community without trying to nail down exactly, all the details of the types of housing and so on, or the types of commercial that would be permitted. It's deliberately meant to be a negotiation between the municipality and a developer.
Okay, thank you.
Warden Rolston.
Thank you. And I think that's where we get into trouble. We try to allow some built-in flexibility, and the result is that we don't always understand what we've built in until we get something that maybe we don't really want. But that flexibility that's been built in there turns into flexibility for the development community with very little flexibility for council. Because if it is something that council had not perhaps considered for that area, for lack of a better word, flexible wording there could be interpreted and is interpreted by developers to allow it. And thereby, should we say, no, that's not what we meant, then we're at that age-old conundrum where we're told, but it doesn't go against council's policies. So as much as we like to build in some flexibility, I think we are now at the point where we have to learn to build in some protection. And I'm not a planner. I'm not sure how we do it. But I think, or at least what I've heard loud and clear this last while, is that the folks who have built the communities, particularly I'm thinking right now in the Enfield area, those folks aren't happy with the direction that we've recently been going. So, and I know you can't just all of a sudden go back and rezone land. There are already applications in the queue, and I understand all that. But in that bigger picture, when we look at doing things like that and zoning land for R2T, for example, then your John Q. Public looks at the zoning and thinks, oh, that's R2T, that's townhouse, it's R2. We're pretty, that's okay. I'm content with that. But if there's a different land use designation there available by development agreement, all of a sudden his R2 or his R2T turns into something called WCDD. And that allows something vastly different. And I'm not sure that I think that's a good idea. I think we should have clarity for folks. I think if we think that those lands could be developed as R2 or R2T or this, then we should have something that very clearly allows for that. And so I don't know what the answer is, but I think the public are confused until something pops up that they don't like. And even we as counselors, we're not planners. And I'm the first one to tell you, I don't have our planning documents memorized. And I don't know just what's allowed in every zone or every land use designation. But I just think that there must be some way that we can have a little more clarity so that if someone looks at our zoning map, then, you know, if I looked at a map and I saw it was zoned R2, I'd probably assume that that's what was allowed on it. And I think when we vary for that, we cause confusion. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Is anyone prepared to move the motion? Councillor Garden Cole. You're muted, Councillor.
I just want to speak to the recommendation. So all this motion is to, I guess it's to change that one area and leave assuming that the rest will all stay as WCDD. Is that correct?
That's a staff recommendation, yes.
All I think about is that when I look at that Elmsdale subdivision and all the people who have been there since the beginning, like, you know, Councillor Mitchell, or who have moved there, nobody would ever suspect that growing up behind them or amidst them were going to be, you know, 5-story apartment buildings. And I think that that would be a reasonable assumption that that wasn't going to happen. But with this, that could very well happen. As Councillor Musa said a month ago, those apartment buildings could be looking right down into the backyards of our 2 houses right next to them.
Well,
And to me, that seems wrong.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So in the case of that application, it's already an active application. So anything you change in your documents won't impact that application now. So, you know, I guess given that we have somebody who's actively trying to do something under the CDD designation, it really wouldn't matter that you would change it now.
Well, I guess, and yeah, you're right. But what I just said is still what I feel. And now I'm just feeling like it's very unfortunate going forward for those people in that subdivision. But that's my stand on it. Thank you.
Councillor Perry. You're muted or can't hear you there, Councillor. Still can't hear you.
I will move staff's recommended motion.
We have a mover. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Tingley. Deputy Warden Mitchell, you were on before. You have the floor.
The question to you to staff, why the exemption for Elmsdale lumber? Could you clarify that with me?
Sure, Mr. Chair, just going back to the map here, because they have an application before council right now to change this to another designation, the industrial commercial designation. So I think there'll still be enough time in this plan update that if that application either gets withdrawn or refused, that you would still have time to come back and revisit this land to potentially take it out of the CDD as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Warden Rolston to the motion. You're muted, Warden.
This motion removes one small portion, but I guess my understanding of the intent of the request was a little bit different. I understood it to be more, well, this, but a review of the appropriateness of putting the WCDD designation on lands that were zoned for, well, R2 or R2T. So I said before, I think it leads to a false sense of security for folks and confusion overall. So I'm prepared to support this motion to take at least a small part of that out of the WCDD. But what I would like to see is specifically what I've said, a strong look at whether or not our land use designation should better match the zoning for clarity purposes. And developers always have the option to come to council and ask for a rezoning. And if there's whether they get it or not, we don't know, but we try to put the appropriate zone on the land. And it just seems to me that if we zone land R2, which is 2-unit residential, correct?
Correct.
Then people should be comfortable in the assumption that that's what's going to be developed unless it's rezoned. And so what does medium density allow?
That's through you,
Emma.
through you, Mr. Chair. That's the designation that generally goes with the R2T zone. So it's just to reflect the fact that that zone is already there. Then we would sort of backfill with the MR designation. And actually, that's usually the way you start. You don't usually start with the zone. You start with the land use designation. What are the general idea for this area in terms of future, whether it's industrial or residential or what have you. And then you sort of refine that down to a zone in your land use bylaw.
So under the MR designation, what's allowed?
It goes with the R2T zone. So whatever's permitted in the R2T zone, which are 2-unit dwellings, townhouses, and small multi-unit buildings.
Up to how many units?
8 units.
Now you see, even after all the years that I have sat here, I find that R2T allowing 8 units to be counterintuitive. I just do. And I think you will find the majority of the public would find that, you know, when they see that number 2 and an R in front of it, that's what they see. So I will. Oh my, I don't know if I'm in favor of changing the WCDD to MR or not, or if it should be changed to ER, similar to the R2. But if you're
Well,
telling me that all R2T, am I correct in understanding that all R2T are generally designated MR?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. I'm pretty sure this is the only one that's not.
Okay. I'm prepared to support this motion, but I think we need a deeper look at the whole thing. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Councillor Garden Cole. You're muted, Councillor.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. By changing the one section there close to the lumber mill, is that a change that would have to be made for them in order to go through with that biochar, or could they go through with that with the existing zoning?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So they would need, if they could do it in the existing area, just go back to the zoning map here. If they could do it in this current gray area, they would still need a development agreement. They wouldn't need a designation or zone change, but they're proposing to use an area beyond the area currently zoned industrial. So that's why they really need 3 things. They need a designation change, a zone change, and a development agreement.
So really, the only function of this is just to change the zonings to enable that to happen for them, I guess. That's what I'm seeing.
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, yes. I mean, they have an application in front of council. If that application wasn't there, I guess, you know, I wouldn't have made that recommendation.
Can you go back to the recommendation, please?
So Mr. Chair, as I said, if once council deals with that application, you know, if it doesn't go to industrial commercial, then we would probably come back and recommend that that also be included with the lands that are being removed from the CDD.
that all, Councillor Garden Cole?
Yes, thank you.
Warden Rolston?
What would happen if we remove those lands from WCCD now? That wouldn't affect the current application.
Through you, Mr. Chair, true. I think it's a little bit confusing if you have two things going on at the same time for the same piece of land, but you're right. I mean, council could give us direction to do that. And, you know, this review is not going to be completed until probably closer to the end of the year. I'm pretty sure the Elmsdale lumber application will be completed by that time. So yes, if you gave us direction to change it to away from the CDD to, I assume it would be the ER you would want it to go to. We could, I guess, build that into the draft plan that we're putting together. And then if the Elmsdale lumber application gets approved, then that would change that again. It just seems confusing to do those two at the same time.
With all due respect, it's very confusing to have land zoned one way with land designation that allows something entirely different on it. So.
Okay, seeing no one else, I'd be looking for Councillor Hebb.
Minute at the last minute, just something popped into my head. If this recommendation is voted down, does this interfere with the application for Elmsdale lumber?
Through Mr. Chair, no. This wouldn't affect whether this, if it's this motion, whether it's approved or not, it wouldn't interfere with the Elmsdale lumber application.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no one else, be looking for the question.
Question.
Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. All in favor, signify by raising your hand and saying aye.
Right.
And the votes are in. It is passed unanimously. Okay, next up, we have amendments to the dangerous and unsightly premises policy regarding excavation sites. And Debbie, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to confirm, do you see the full screen or do you see the presenter mode?
Center mode.
Presenter mode. All right, there you go. It should be good for you there now.
No, it hasn't changed, Debbie.
Hasn't changed. Sorry.
You may have to stop share and start it again.
Is it okay there now?
No, we just see
We
you now.
don't see it at all.
And how about now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. So the dangerous or unsightly premises policy. So East Hants Council passed a motion C21-317 at their October meeting, which directed staff to prepare a report to investigate options to secure construction sites. At their February meeting, Council approved amendments to bylaw P900 building bylaw, which requires certain construction sites to be fenced. At that meeting, Council also passed the following motion, and that was to direct staff to bring back a report to committee with further actions and information to consider immediate response for emergency situations regarding the fencing of construction sites. So as a result, staff have proposed amendments to the dangerous and unsightly premises policy to address excavations caused by construction sites that may be dangerous. And so council has a dangerous or unsightly premises enforcement policy that delegates its council's authority to act on dangerous or unsightly properties to the administrator of the policy. And to make it clear that the dangerous or unsightly premises policy also applies to excavations created by construction activity, staff are proposing updates to the policy. A line is proposed to be added to the policy indicating that excavations made for the construction purposes would be considered dangerous under the dangerous and unsightly provisions of the Municipal Government Act. And the administrator of the policy gets the authority to take immediate action through the provisions of the Municipal Government Act in the same manner as other items that are considered dangerous. So that's just 350 of the Act, where public safety requires immediate action. The administrator may immediately take the necessary action to prevent danger or may remove the dangerous structure or condition. And so since your policy delegates that authority to the administrator, we've proposed to add a line to the considerations dangerous premises section of the policy. So it'll state that in determining whether enforcement action is warranted for a dangerous premises, the municipality shall consider factors that include but are not limited to risk of falling into an excavation made for construction purposes. And in considering these risk factors, the municipality shall also consider the proximity to a street and occupied property and whether the risk acts as an allurement to children or other persons. And so by listing it here, it gives the administrator the authority to consider it dangerous, and then they can either have a fence put up around it, or maybe it needs to be infilled, or something else that we haven't thought of. So the recommendation is that Planning Advisory Committee recommends that council amend the existing dangerous or unsightly premises policy by including a provision for excavations caused by construction as a consideration for a dangerous premises. And below is the two recommended motions, one for the regular meeting of council policy today and then for next week. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Debbie. Is anyone prepared to move the recommended motion? I guess that's not till the council meeting today, policy meeting. Is there any discussion on this? Warden Rolston.
I always find this confusing because in order to get it to our policy meeting, I think we need a motion to send it to the policy meeting.
Correct.
And then at the policy meeting, we have to make that same motion again.
To send it to council.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I would move the first recommended motion.
Second.
Moved by Warden Rolston, seconded by Deputy Warden Mitchell. Any discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. Everybody go to the vote. Signify by
Aye.
staying aye and raising your hand. Keep your hands up. And the motion is passed unanimously. Okay, next up, we have Bob Bona, application for rezoning, and Rachel's going to take this one.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. My screen is frozen. I'll just give me a second, see if it wakes up. Oh, there we go. Fine. I'm just going to try unsharing and sharing again because I'm having some issues. Can you see my presentation screen now?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about the delay. So this application is for the two properties outlined in red on your screen. It's currently zoned R1 and designated established residential. The applicant wants to sell those two properties and wants to rezone to R2 to allow for 2 dwelling units on each of those lots. So in the R1 zone, those 2 dwelling units are not permitted. So that's the reason for the rezoning. And you can see there is another property in between the two. So it's kind of they're separated by one property. So we can see the subject property here. There are all subject properties outlined in yellow. This property in between, the dwelling on there was destroyed by fire and will be reconstructed as a single unit dwelling. The surrounding properties are zoned established residential neighborhood, which is identified by the light yellow color. You can see along here on White Road, opposite the properties here, and then further up White Road on the opposite side. There are R2 zoned properties behind the application site and also on Bona Crescent, and then also on this section of Catherine Street here. And there are also some R2 properties on the opposite side of White Road, but closer to Highway 2. So policy RD23 requires that council consider all the criteria given to determine whether the lots can be rezoned to R1 from R1 to R2. And staff have found that although the two lots in question meet several of the criteria of RD23, they don't meet all of the criteria. And that criteria is included in the back of the staff report. The two lots do not meet B of the policy, and this policy helps to create contiguous areas of compatible residential or mixed-use character. The proposed rezoning would not result in the creation of a contiguous residential character that is compatible with White Road. If rezoned, the two lots would be the only two lots permitted 2-unit dwelling construction along a row of single dwelling unit properties. Additionally, these two lots are not located adjacent to each other and will have an existing R1 zone property in the middle. Policy IM 18G discourages creating leapfrog development pattern. So planning staff acknowledge that there are R2 lots on the opposite side of White Road, but these are not directly opposite except for a small portion of the corner of one of the lots. The lots that are zoned R2 are closer to the higher densities along Highway Number 2. Planning staff believe that this type of leapfrog or checkerboard zoning is not desirable and should not be encouraged. Hence, we are recommending the refusal of this application. And a detailed table of the criteria, policies and the comments from staff is appended to the final staff report. So we've had some comments back from the Municipal Department of Infrastructure and Operations, and they've raised no concerns about servicing wastewater and water capacity for the development. White Road is a municipal owned road. However, comments that there would be negligible traffic impacts resulting from the rezoning. And also Nova Scotia Department of Public Works have not raised any concerns regards to the proposed developments. So this just shows where we are in the application process, and a public hearing is scheduled for council meeting next week. Our public information meeting was not required for this application because it's a rezoning that doesn't require an amendment to the designation. So out of 138 questionnaires that were mailed out, 9 were returned. There were 7 cited concerns and 2 were in favor of the development. So some of the comments that were received that the development will look odd and will not match the surrounding architecture. So the rezoning does not match the R1 zone properties located adjacent to the 2 lots and then also along White Road. Planning staff agree that if 2 lots are rezoned, it would not be in harmony with the adjacent developments and other developments further along White Road. Another comment was development will increase traffic. There'll be negligible impacts as a result of this development. The lots are too small for 2 dwelling units. Both lots meet the minimum lot sizes for an R2 lot. And parking concerns. The parking requirements, if approved, would be as per the land use bylaw, which requires 1 parking space per unit. So to conclude, planning staff have reviewed the application on behalf of submitted on behalf of Bona Investment Limited for rezoning of 2 properties located on White Road. Staff recommending the application be refused, and because we believe that the rezoning from R1 to R2 is not consistent with the single unit residential character on this portion of White Road. And then just a note there to say that any decision by this council on this application is appealable to the Utility and Review Board. And the recommendation is that the application be refused. The alternative would be that if PAC council have a different opinion with regards to their analysis of the MPS policies, an alternative therefore is recommendation could be made to approve the application. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Rachel. Councillor Rhino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's okay, so if I'm correct, he wants to rezone them, then sell them. I guess I have a problem with that. You know, if it's owned R1, he wants us to change it. Is it to receive possibly more financial gain for that property under the rezoning? And if so, I'm not in favor of that. I do believe that if sold the lots and the new owner would come forth with an application, then it would be a little different. Now, am I wrong in thinking this, or what's your opinion?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So that's the indication we had received from the applicant, is that he was looking at selling the lots, but he could develop them himself. He's not confirmed either way whether he is going to sell them, but he had indicated to us that that's what his intentions were.
Well, that seems to be the indication in this report. He wants to sell these properties and he wants to rezone them. So, I mean, that's the only conclusion that I can draw. So.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Hebb, did you have your hand up or was you just, I had you there, okay. Counselor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, just looking at this picture here, so I just want to update you that the property in between the two subject properties that burned down, that house has been fully erected and I expect they will be moving in very shortly. They've been working on it all winter. So that is a single dwelling home. Regardless of whether he's looking to sell these and hoping to whatever he's looking to do with them, I agree with staff's recommendation that it is not a good fit to have a checkerboard pattern of R2, R1, R2. It's R1 across the road from them. And I agree with the staff's recommendation on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Perry.
Counselor Garden Cole took the words right out of my mouth, so I'm good.
Seeing no one else, is someone prepared to move the recommendation? Warden Rolston.
Yeah, just also in agreement with staff's recommendation on this one, but given the procedure, the requirement is to go to the public hearing regardless of the recommendation. Am I correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the public hearing has been scheduled for next week, but yes, regardless of the recommendation, the public hearing has been scheduled. Yeah.
Thank you.
Counselor Hebb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. We can go back to the picture there of the, I guess I'm looking at it a different way. We've got R2 zoning behind that and just down the road, just a little bit across the road, we've got R2 there. And I understand staff's report leapfrogging and whatever. This is when you first come into the subdivision. And I take it that this gentleman has a chance to sell the property if it would be rezoned to R2. And if it wasn't zoned to R2, the person that wanted to buy them, I guess, is not going to buy them. So I don't think there's any personal gain financially there other than selling the property. These are two house buildings. They're not bungalow style or single dwelling. There would not be a big significant difference. I don't think if anybody driving up and down the road would notice any difference anyway. These bylaws and zonings were put in years and years and years ago, and things change over the years. And I've seen a lot of these duplexes put up, and I think they're quite attractive compared to some of the houses that are put up. So I have to say that I'm not in favor of staff's report right now. Thank you.
Deputy Warden Mitchell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, are there any other areas that have leapfrogging or checkerboard at the present?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can't think of any off the top of my head. I don't know if the director can think of any.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Well, there would be, because there would be legacy issues out there where, you know, for example, there was an R2 building and then singles developed up around it. I'm sure we could find others, but, you know, in good or general planning principle, it's not a good thing to try that, to achieve that from the get-go. It's to try to avoid it.
Is it to avoid it because of looks?
Through you, Mr. Chair, well, it's more the predictability for the residents that live on that street. It's for, again, just the compatibility. And there is an aesthetic issue as well, sure, where you have, you know, you go from a property with similar looks with one driveway to then the next property with two driveways, then back to one with one driveway and so on.
So checkerboard, if I understand, is single unit dwelling in the duplex and single unit dwelling in a duplex? Is that what you class as checkerboard?
That through Mr. Chair, that's what we consider checkerboard. The wording of the policy talks about leapfrog and contiguous. So I don't know if checkerboard is used specifically in the policy, but that's the intent. It's, I guess, by using the word checkerboard, it gives you kind of a visual understanding of what the policy is trying to achieve.
So could you have a single unit dwelling, two unit dwellings, and then go back to single unit? Would that be checkerboard?
Yes, so you're leaping from one use to the next to a different one. So it could be R1, R2, R1, R2, or just uses that aren't the same in the kind of a stretch of land uses.
Would that have to be on a main road or let's say a side road off a subdivision?
Through you, Mr. Chair, well, the policy tries to achieve that. It's not just specifically related to residential development. It's all types of zoning. It's trying to keep a consistent area of zoning in an area rather than so it's not specifically related to residential. When we talk about that leapfrog or checkerboarding, the policy that talks about that is for all types of zones.
I just noticed that up on the Elmwood Estates, there are two duplexes on the cul-de-sac surrounded by single unit homes, and those are my comments. Thank you.
You, Councillor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As of now, like, didn't we pass a bylaw that you're allowed as secondary dwelling on R1 zone or no?
Yeah.
So as of now, they could build 2 units separated, and the only thing they could do is not have them on separate PID numbers, right?
That's right. Through you, Mr. Chair, single unit dwellings can have accessory dwelling units. Those units need to be on the same lot as the single unit dwelling. And there are limits on the size of those accessory dwelling units as well. So you can't have 2 main dwelling units and call one accessory. They have to be size-wise accessory to the main dwelling. But yes, you can have those 2 units.
So they already can have 2, but they cannot separate them if they want to sell one and leave the other, right?
That's right.
That's
yeah.
only different. And across the street, those lot on Catherine Street, they can have 2 units each legally, a duplex, because they're on 2 roads, right?
I'd have to check the regulations, what it talks about on the corner lots. But if, John, do you recall if there's any ability to build more than one lot if it's on a corner lot?
There, through you, Mr. Chair, there is in the R2 zone,
Okay.
not in the R1 zone. You can
In
do
the
a
R1
4 unit.
No, two units, like one on each road, right?
Through Mr. Chair, they'd have to subdivide the lot and have the frontage on each road, White Road and Catherine Street. And I don't know if it meets the minimum lot sizes for the R1 zone.
I thought I read somewhere that you could have 2 units, but they have to be like designed in a certain design that one face one road and the other one face the other. I don't know if I'm wrong, but that's what I read that somewhere, so I don't know if I'm wrong. Anyways, that's my question. Thank you.
Councillor Tingley.
Through the chair, I have a question. The house that's in between these 2 subject properties, did the people that own that property make their wishes known about this development?
All the questionnaires have been scanned. I don't know if I'm able to say that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, you really shouldn't talk about individual responses, but all of the responses were posted for committee's review.
Okay. Because if all 3 of them had been R2, I think it would have been, my decision would have been to go with it. But where it is checkered, I have some concerns, especially for the person that's in between, if they have any problem with it. But on the street I live on, there are houses with accessory properties attached and 2 driveways. They can't be sold separately, but they almost look like a duplex And it really hasn't changed the look of the street. I'm kind of leaning towards going with staff's recommendation here, but it's a tough one.
At all, Counselor? Counselor Rhino?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just regard to procedure, am I correct in hearing is if we accept staff recommendation, which is not to proceed, it still goes to public hearing? Because is that what I understand?
Through Mr. Chair, so the recommendation is to refuse the application. The recommendation isn't not to proceed. It's we're recommending that that the application be refused, and that would be at the public hearing next week.
So I guess on a little point of procedure, like right now, we're going to say no if we do decide this, but we're still going to public hearing. That's, I just can't understand that.
Well, through Mr. Chair, if I could answer that one. Well, you already approved a public hearing, so we set it. If this motion passes, then PAC will be recommending a refusal, but council could change its mind after it hears from the applicant and the public. So that's the point of the public hearing.
So we're past the point of refusing this right out of the gate.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, yes, because I mean, the committee could recommend that you not go ahead with the public hearing, but you would then have to go to council to get that decision, I guess, sanctioned, and it's scheduled for next week. So there's really, I guess you could cancel the public hearing at the beginning of the council meeting, but we don't see much point in that given that it's already scheduled.
Yeah, it's very confusing. Thank you.
Gordon Rolston?
Yes, thank you. Well, these R1 zoned lands have an underlying designation, correct?
Yes, they do.
And is that underlying designation established residential?
Yes.
So the folks who built the communities in that area and who have homes there now, in my opinion, would be expecting R1 established residential 1-unit homes on those properties. And given everything that we've been hearing lately, I am inclined to respect the residents that built that community. And I think it's pretty clear if I bought a lot there, what I would expect to be able to build on that lot. So those are my comments. I'll be supporting staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Warden. Seeing no one else, is anyone prepared to move the recommendation? Councillor Garden Cole, are you moving it? You're muted there, Councillor.
I'll move the recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Garden Cole. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rhino. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no one, be looking for the question.
Question.
Question's been called. All in favor signify by raising your hand. Keep your hands up, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Keep your hands up, please, for the ayes. We have 8 in favor. Can I have the nays, please? And we have Councillors Hebb and Deputy Warden Mitchell voting nay. The motion is passed. Okay, next up, we have the FH Development Group WCDD application. Rachel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the applicant owns 3 properties between Ralston Drive and Elmwood Drive, and they're outlined in red on the map to the right. They are zoned for R2 developments, which is 2-unit dwellings. They are designated WCDD, which is enables this application. The properties are approximately 31 hectares in size. So the application proposes a mixture of housing types, residential types. The roads will link Elmwood Drive through to Ralston Drive and include a link through Beach Street that will allow Pine Hill Drive to access the new road system. The number of units are 662, and you can see the layout, the number of types of units in the table at the bottom of the screen there. That's the types of dwellings that the applicant has proposed. So the plan shows you that there's a road that links through to Elmwood Drive through to Ralston Drive. There's a proposed sidewalk on one side, which is shown by the dash line, and then the thick black line is an AT trail, which will be a 3-meter asphalt AT trail. The other roads in the development has sidewalks on one side. We have 2 areas of parkland, one here and one just here, close to Elmwood Drive. There are 2 multi-unit residential areas, and I'll go through each of these particular types on each slide. So we have the multi-unit area up here, and then a multi-unit area down here, and I've just overlaid those onto the aerial photography so you can see how they relate to existing buildings on adjacent pieces of land. So for single unit dwellings, there was some concern at the last meeting about the 10.36 meter frontage that's being proposed, which is less than the 16 meters required minimum lot required for the R1 zone in the land use bylaw. So I took some images from Governor's Brook, which is in Halifax, and these lots are 9.75 meter frontage. So it just kind of gives you a visual of what that looks like with those smaller lot singles. Approximately 119 units, and you can see that area is kind of this yellow area here, that the area closer to Elmwood Drive. And also just to note that that 10.3 meter 36 meter frontage is the frontage that was approved for both AMCO and the Clayton developments for their single unit dwellings. The 2 dwelling unit area is the purple area here, and that's linking through Ralston Drive. And then you can see that there are approximately 76 lots, and the minimum frontage will be as per the land use bylaw. The townhouse units is identified with this blue area up adjacent to Highway 102. And this will permit stacked townhouse dwellings and also on-street townhouse dwellings. And each unit will be required to have 2 parking stalls. So this is an image down here that I took from the Tyler Street Sam Crescent development. I found this on Viewpoint, showing the types of townhouse dwellings that are being proposed in that area, just to kind of give you a visual for some of the townhouse units that are being built on FH development lands now. So the multi-unit area, there's 2 areas. They're covered by this red area here and this red area here. So at the last meeting, the developer heard comments from Planning Advisory Committee regarding their concerns about these multi-unit areas. And as a result, the developers amended his plans to reduce the size of those buildings. Still 343 approximate units. Parking will be as required as per the land use bylaw. So in this slide here, we have the plans for the multi-unit as they were originally presented when the application came in. So we had 4 blocks of multi-unit buildings. This is the area that's close to Vernon Court, which is just alongside here. And in the top right corner, this is McKay's Lane, and this original proposal was for two blocks of apartment buildings. So now the proposal is for these buildings here, which are apartment buildings. Vernon Court is just here. And these are apartment townhouse buildings, which will be a maximum of 11 meters high. So he's changed the layout of these areas to reduce the number of apartment buildings, but add in some townhouse units. And then this area here next to McKay's Lane, again, a multi-unit apartment building. But in discussion with the developer, they are actually looking at whether they can remove this townhouse building here. And that's to address some concerns raised by some residents on McKay's Lane. If the developer moves forward with that, then that would just be the one multi-unit building here. And the maximum height of these would be 4 stories. At the last meeting, the buildings were proposed at 5 stories of residential with 1 story of parking, so a 6-story building, but now they've been dropped down to 4 stories. So I've just included some images here of some FH development apartment buildings that are on their website, showing you the kind of style of buildings that they have been building. And just some aerial photography so you can see the relationship of these buildings down in McKay's Lane to existing buildings in the area. And again, I've done the same here so you can see that relationship with Vernon Court. So this dash line here shows a 10-meter non-disturbance area. So there'll be 10 meters non-disturbance. And then the buildings are still quite a bit further back than the dwellings on Vernon Court. And also on this one, there is a 10-meter non-disturbance here. And this is the proposed parking area. So the buildings will actually be further away than that. So there are 2 areas of parkland. We have this area here and this area here. And the sizes are there in the presentation. There's also 2, there's walkway 1, which is this area here. I don't know if you can see my pointer, but it goes from the extension of Ralston Drive into the old Elmsdale School property, and then an easement over the multi-unit area so that we can provide a trail down to highway number 2. The remaining open space contribution will be cash in lieu, working kind, or a combination of both. And there's approximately 5% of the open space contribution will be of that cash in lieu, cash or working kind. So the traffic impact study has been submitted and reviewed by Nova Scotia Public Works, and they've approved and accepted the findings. There were 2 main findings in there that Trunk 2 and Elmwood Drive intersection. The analysis results suggested this intersection is in an immediate need of a northbound left turn lane and a southbound right turn lane. In addition, the analysis also indicated that traffic signals will eventually be warranted under the full build-out scenario. So this is written into the development agreement to require that to occur. So Route 214 and Ralston Drive, a new eastbound auxiliary right turn lane will be installed. And just so you can kind of visualize what that looks like, you would be coming down Highway 214 from Sobeys, and there'll be a right lane, auxiliary turn lane just here, and that's the intersection improvements that will be proposed for the Ralston Drive Highway 214 intersection. So Ralston Drive is currently a gravel road which is owned by the province. Staff are in the process of discussing the future upgrades and ownership of Ralston Drive with Nova Scotia Public Works, and an agreement has been drafted subject to approval by council, whereby Public Works upgrades the road and builds to transportation sidewalk. And that's with Nova Scotia Public Works right now. We haven't had a response back from them yet, but we'll continue that discussion with them. The road would then be taken over by the municipality for future maintenance. So stormwater management. There are some existing stormwater issues in the area, and a recent letter to council in October 2021 from residents identified some of the challenges they're experiencing. The municipal standards for stormwater management requires that pre and post development stormwater flows must be balanced through the use of stormwater management ponds, oversized pipes, flow control structures, etc. So the municipality does not have a mandate to address existing issues as per the storm drainage policy. However, some additional stormwater management improvements could be explored further through the storm drainage policy. So there's an option there, excuse me, to potentially deal with some of those existing issues. So financial impact analysis has been undertaken, and it shows that there's an annual tax revenue from the development, and then the annual cost of providing services, which equals an annual financial benefit to the municipality of 479,000. And then Elmsdale Fire Department will receive an estimated 156,000 per year for this development. And infrastructure charges generated by the development is estimated at almost 3 million. So just to highlight some of the benefits of the development compared to as of right development, the workforce development plan identified that access to affordable housing is a barrier to business development in East Hants, and the mixture of housing includes smaller units which provide for some price points which are more affordable than large single or even semi-detached housing. So there's no specific affordable housing which is, I guess, supported by funding from the government, but there are a mix of more affordable housing prices. And also not everyone is able to purchase a home or is even interested in owning a home. So this development provides an option for rental units. There is going to be a 3-meter wide active transportation trail provided. This is in addition to sidewalk, and that's not required through an as of right development. 2 larger open spaces are provided, and this may not be achievable with an as of right development, as we would negotiate 10% each time a subdivision application comes in, and it's not always easy to have a larger area. You might end up with more smaller areas as each phase comes forward. And this is an update. The last bullet point is an update since this was posted on the agenda, but the developer's engineer has provided an analysis of the as of right numbers, which were around 400 units. And that indicates that traffic signals are not technically warranted at the Elmwood Drive and Highway 2 intersection. This analysis has not been reviewed by Public Works, but it does show that we know right now that there will be intersection improvement requirements, a lighted intersection of Elmwood Drive and Highway 2 through the development, but that might not be the case if this goes through as of right development. So that's not something that we could, that may not meet that warrant requirement. So questionnaires were mailed out to 3 properties within 300 meters. From those questionnaires, the first batch that was sent out, 42 property owners responded, and they've been scanned for PAC to review. And then the second questionnaire, 19 responses have been received, and they've been scanned for PAC to review. And as of the posting of the agenda, I've received 3 more questionnaires, and they are very similar comments to what's been already provided. Although not required by the municipal plan strategy, a public information meeting was held regarding this application. So with the first questionnaire, the majority of the comments were raising objections, but there was a small number of support questionnaires. Summary of the comments have been included in Appendix C. And just a very quick summary there: concern with the increase in traffic and its impact, concern with impact on existing infrastructure, concern with pedestrian safety, concern with impact on schools, and concern with increasing stormwater flooding and its impact on the area. So from the second questionnaire, concern with the increase in traffic and concern with increased stormwater flooding and its impact on areas already struggling. There were other issues raised, but those were the ones that had the most comments. So to conclude, the developer has demonstrated a commitment to the Wcdd goal by submitting a proposal that encourages walkability and active transportation. Residential developments proposed to be comprised of varying densities and housing types. Parkland trails and active transportation routes will not only benefit the residents, but the wider community. And the developer did listen to the concerns raised by PAC at their meeting in February and has amended the multi-unit residential area. So the land is zoned R2, which means the developer could build out an R2 development with the same road connections and layout as proposed. This development offers elements which would not be required with an as-of-right development. And the first draft of the development agreement has been provided for PAC to review. It's about 90% complete. The final draft will be presented to PAC with the final staff report. And here we are in the process. We can see that we're still at the staff evaluation stage, and subject to approval by council, the next stage would be the final staff report and moving on to public hearing. And the recommendation is that staff be authorized to schedule a public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Rachel. Any comments? Warden Rolston.
Thank you. I'm still kind of leery of that 10.36 meter frontage, because in my old fashioned brain, that's just right around 34 feet frontage. What are the side setbacks?
Get that for you now. The minimum side yard setback is 1.8 meters.
So between 4 and 5 feet on each side. So to take, 8 to 10 feet off of that. And everyone has their own vision of how they like things to look, I guess. I don't like these tiny frontages. And just because we did it in another development, which is another type of development, rather, I look at this as more of an infill development than I did either Clayton or Armco. Yeah, I just, I like to see the single unit dwellings there, but I cannot imagine a 34-foot frontage lot, row by row by row, and those still cause me concern. Thank you.
Warden, any other comments?
Mr. Chair, could I just, so that side yard setback, it's equivalent to 5.9 feet at the 1.8 meters, and that's the exact same as currently exists in the R1 and R2 zone, so there's no change there.
So then you're taking 12 feet off of that 34-foot frontage. That takes you down to 22 feet that you've got to build a house and shoehorn it in there.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Well, I don't know, shoehorn or design, pick your term.
Well, that's not much. I stand by my comments. I don't like at all lots with that small an amount of frontage. I'm sorry, I just don't. Thank you. I think we have minimum frontages for a reason, and I think that there should be some valid reason to, move away from that. Thank you.
Councillor Hebb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just some questions. First, I'd like to make a comment that I'm glad to see the developer listen to the public and to council and all the things they brought up, and they certainly made some changes, and I certainly do appreciate that. Under this development agreement, the intersections that's on Elmwood and 214 and number 2 there, is the changes to be made, is that something the developer is going to have to pay for, or who pays for that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the developer will be responsible for designing and building the improvements to the Ralston Drive Highway 214 intersection. The other intersection, the one with Elmwood Drive, that's a little bit different because right now the intersection is not up to standards based on the traffic flowing through it. So right now there is a need for auxiliary right turn and auxiliary left turn lanes into that subdivision, which aren't there. So the Public Works has said that they are interested in entering into an agreement with the developer. So they will assume some responsibility for the cost of upgrades, because there is upgrades needed right now, and the developer, I anticipate, will need to cover the cost of their portion of the upgrades.
Very good, thank you. The walking trail that's going to be going through that development, is that something that they are going to build, or is this something that the municipality will be building?
This, are we talking about the walking trail, this easement here?
Yeah,
Um,
goes through their part of the subdivision, yes.
So through Mr. Chair, all we've asked for is an easement for that land. So what we could do is the municipality could build that, or the developer could build it and we give them credit towards their open space contribution. So there's a number of options there as to how that could happen, but all the developer is required to provide for the development agreement is the actual easement over the land.
Okay, thank you. The other thing is I know it's a big issue with stormwater runoffs there, and I know we've got existing problems in Pine Hill that has been there for years. I know they're going to take this in consideration, but they're not required to help mitigate the ones that's already been there. Is this something that they could partner with the municipality and maybe we could address the issues all the way through Pine Hill and into the rest of the existing subdivision?
So through Mr. Chair, there is in the storm drainage policy, we have section 6 here that says that the municipality may consider issuing credit on wastewater infrastructure charges if stormwater management enhancements for new development proposal can quantify a benefit in reducing inflow and infiltration issues for wastewater systems in neighboring developments, resulting in a net benefit to municipal wastewater system as a whole. And this would be a request made by the municipality to a developer during the development application process. So that option is there. If council wanted to pursue that with the developer, they could have that discussion to see what improvements could be made, and the developer could be given a credit on their infrastructure charges. I don't know if Jesse has anything to add to that.
Well, no, this is, I know it's certainly be an interest to the people that live in the Pine Hill and that area there that has headwater problems. And it seems to me if the municipality can do anything at all to help them with their problems, that this would be a great time to do it. And if the developer would be able to help out in that way too, and if the municipality had to pay some money, this has been an ongoing situation ever since the subdivision was built. So I would be looking forward to having that conversation with the developer, and maybe we can rectify all the problems there between the two between the application and the municipality. Thank you.
Councilor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilor have actually asked my question, but I have like a follow-up. If any other drainage like problems appear to, so it's gonna be, is it gonna be dealt through the municipality or through civil law, civil matter, like throwing somebody against, they don't know who they're gonna fight for, fight.
Well, the developer will be required to balance pre and post stormwater flows. So they will have an engineer design that stormwater system so that this development doesn't increase any stormwater issues on any adjacent properties. I don't know in terms of liability, like, do you have a response in terms of liability on that, John? Like in terms of who's responsible?
Through Mr. Chair. So ultimately it's it would be the developer and their design engineer that's responsible for they have to design something that balances pre and post. And if for whatever reason they don't achieve that, then that is a civil issue, and the engineer could be, or the developer could be held liable.
So after he sold all the land and all the properties, what they gonna do with him? Like, oh,
yeah,
I
guess
like, my only concern. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, the design engineers, their responsibility would continue if they designed it and it was built according to their design. It doesn't matter who owns it. At that point, you could still go after them, and they'll have professional liability insurance for a reason.
Yeah, like I know it's not their problem now, but with the change of weather we're having now, it could be something major could be happening over there, and it's not the responsibility of the. It didn't happen because of the development, but because of the weather, the extreme weather we're having, and who's gonna be suing who over there? And I think it's all gonna come to us. So I don't know. I hope everything go good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I was going to speak, but I see that Councillor Mitchell is speaking as well. And due to the fact that it's in his, that he is the councillor for that area, I would be interested in seeing his comments on this, where he knows his residents and what their feelings are on this. So I'll let him speak.
We'll get to Councillor Mitchell when his turn comes up on the list. He's still got Councillor Perry ahead of him.
Okay, well, I'll let him go ahead then. Thanks.
Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back to the smaller lots, I originally, when Clayton and the other developments came forward, was not in favor of the smaller lots. However, my mind has changed on this, and basically these smaller lots have allowed people to get into a home at a price point that's actually affordable to them. The ability to find housing now is very, very hard, especially for first-time homeowners. Trying to find places, people are offering ridiculous amounts of money for homes that need a lot of work and are being unsuccessful even when they bid 100,000 over asking. It's in talking to some families that I do know that do live in areas with these smaller homes, that was their only option within the price point to get into a single family home to raise their family as their first starter house. I do not see this housing market going anywhere in the near future. I believe that these smaller lots do offer a price point into a better quality home than some of the other options that would be out there for similar size. Granted, I grew up in a rural area. I've also lived in many cities across the country and the world. And yeah, it is very different to see land, which is that small with that minimum frontage, coming from the background of where I was privileged to grow up. However, it's the reality is this is the opportunity that some people do have to own a home. So I've changed my mind on that, on those smaller lots. Improvement to the wastewater. I believe it came up before. Excellent. If there's anything that can be done to increase capacity for wastewater flow to mitigate any of the issues on Pine Crest, I believe it is, or Pinewood, that would be beneficial. The other thing was already said too by Councillor Hebb. This is the process that I believe is really good, is that concerns were raised by residents, concerns were raised by councillors, the developers come back, they've offset these larger apartment buildings far away from any residential R1 home. Nobody will be looking into anybody's backyard at these distances. I just think that, you know, this is a good thing that, you know, they're listening, they're trying to work with the people who live in the area and work with council on this. So as Councillor Garden Cole said, I'll be interested to hear what Councillor Mitchell says, where it's his area. But those are just a couple things that have come up to me that's changed my mind. In looking at this entire development, I believe it offers people different price points to get into housing and even remain in the local area. A lot of those people that currently live in those R1 neighborhood homes at some point will want to downsize, and being able to stay in their own community and possibly move into an apartment building where they don't have the maintenance and everything else required will be desirable. I do know that that is a big issue amongst a lot of seniors now. They want to stay in the same community, but they can't maintain their home. Things like this within that same community would allow some people to stay in that area well into their retirement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Deputy Warden Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot of good points presented by the other councillors, which pretty well covered my points, but I'll quickly go back over them. The flooding issues on Pine Hill, hopefully working with the developer they can be mitigated to help improve their lives. Since I've been in Elmwood since 1980, the biggest concern was having a second exit and entrance to the subdivision in case there was an emergency and the subdivision had to be evacuated and you couldn't get out to the number 2. So hopefully this development would provide that. It also, as Council Perry says, it provides a very different variety of housing. And because we know that we all have different income levels, it would provide those incomes that it maybe aren't at the high end with a place that they could call home. I think the advantage of having the sidewalk and the active transportation trail would provide an area for people to walk to work if that's their desire, to bike. And not everybody's going forward is going to be able to afford a car. And if we have transit down the road, it might provide another way of them getting to work, especially up in the areas of Sobeys Superstore. My question to staff is if they can give me an idea what the length of the build-out would be.
Very, Mr. Chair. So the development agreement has, I believe it's 15 years from the date of registration of the agreement that the development needs to be completed. I don't anticipate it will take that long. The developer's looking at getting started on phase 1 fairly soon. I don't have anything more than that to say that it will be up to 15 years, but highly likely less than that.
15?
That's what the development agreement has written in as to they have to be complete within 15 years.
Okay, well, I'd hope to be around at the end then just to see if the second exit for Elmwood gets built. It sounds like a very good proposal and a project with a wide variety of options. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Warden Rolston.
Thank you. Going back to those narrow lots, what is the as of right frontage again?
It's 16 meters.
Okay, so that's around 20 feet, between 18 and 20 feet. So I guess the other concern for me, other than just not liking those narrow lots, and I still don't, and I don't for a moment think that low-income families are going to be able to afford one of these homes on these narrow lots here. I don't for a minute think that. And that as a starter home for a young couple, it's going to be a fairly affluent young couple who's going to be able to afford that. That's my opinion. Back to the stormwater. I know John didn't like my term shoehorning, but designing as many of those little narrow homes into that land as possible. Hardscapes, a much larger percentage of that land than by going as of right. You're going to have more runoff off of roofs. You're going to have more paved driveways and much less area to mitigate the water in. Can an engineer design something to do it? I have no doubt in my mind that probably they can and they will. But the concern still comes back to what if it doesn't work? Well, then the onus is on the folks to have enough money to hire a lawyer to sue someone and somehow prove that stormwater's worse after this than it was before. Hard to do because, you know, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be expensive. And if the development is sold out, then I hear it's on the engineer who signed off on it and he and his insurance are responsible. Is that what I understood?
Through Mr. Chair, yes, that would be the case.
That engineer isn't going to live forever. What happens then? What happens when, for whatever reason, that engineer is no longer with us and this hasn't been settled or a problem occurs? I'm curious about that. I guess I was thinking that the responsibility of that would be with the developer and would stay with the development at large, but I can understand that it doesn't if the developer doesn't own anything there anymore. So I think there's a gray area there. And this is an area with pre-existing stormwater issues. And, you know, I understand the desire for different types of housing. I still think that these small, narrow lots are going to be more expensive than a lot of people could afford. And I think it's going to make the engineer's job at designing stormwater more difficult. And I think it's going to be almost impossible for John Q. Public to ever prove whether or not it's worse after they're built than it was before. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Councillor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've just been listening to everyone's comments, and I guess mine are basically the same as they were in the beginning. They haven't really changed. I look at these tiny lots, and all I see them as is to see how many dwellings they can fit in a certain area. To me, it's cut and dried. That's why they do it. As far as affordability, it'll probably scare you how much these little buildings will cost on these tiny lots, because that's the way the market is. And as Warden Ralston said, it will be a more affluent couple that will be able to afford them. Certainly not anyone just starting out who's looking for some real affordability. My issue is that you go into a subdivision that is established as a single unit, a single dwelling subdivision, and I could see the duplexes, and I could see the townhouses and that kind of thing. But when you start putting up 4-story apartment buildings that look more like 5 with the parking underneath or whatnot, that's what I have a problem with in these already established subdivisions, and that's not going to change for me. Thank you.
Councillor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if anybody asked about the green space, but it looked very small. Did we ask for cash in lieu, or they offered, or is it up to us or up to them?
Through Mr. Chair, that's what we have negotiated with the developer. The open space areas are, I can give you the size of them. So Park 1 is approximately 4,790 square meters. And Park 2 is approximately 8,254 square meters. So 2 really nice sized park areas. That's what we staff had negotiated with the developer. We felt that was what met the needs of the community. And I think it works out around 5% left in terms of cash or working kind, or the combination of those.
Okay, so that is not up to council, it's up to staff to negotiate that, or we have a say about it?
Well, I mean, council can tell us that that's not what they're looking for in terms of open space. Our Parks and Rec department assisted planning staff in negotiating the open space as you see here. I mean, if council have a different opinion on that,
to me, like this is almost same population as my whole district, and 3 acres for recreation for like 1,200 kids, or I don't know how many kids gonna be there, but at least you're gonna have like 1,200 adults within 600, and the surrounding area could be able to use those open spaces too. I don't know, it's up to the council of the area, but it just caught my attention. And I have another question, probably John or Rachel can answer it. How many units have to be built till we have to have the second access to the subdivision?
So the second exit won't be completed until phase 3. This area, if you can see my pointer, this is phase 3 here. That's where the road will link through. But in the development agreement, there are trigger points. Just bear with me a second, I'll find those. So a maximum of 300 dwelling units will receive a development permit prior to the design of the intersection improvements on Highway 2 and Elmwood Drive. A maximum of 400 dwelling units will receive a development permit prior to Public Works confirming they're satisfied with the intersection improvements. So they can't get more than 400 dwelling units before those intersection improvements are required, and they cannot connect through that road section there until those intersection improvements are complete. But the development agreement also says that developer may seek a reassessment of the required intersection improvements prior to final subdivision approval. So there's the ability there for the developer to speak to Public Works and see whether those intersection improvements still make sense at that point. So that's a big answer for your question, but there are trigger points and they'll be required before that connection happens.
Wow. So don't we have it in our rule, or we could dictate whatever we like to? Because I know in my area there's a subdivision that couldn't do any more than 100 homes before they have second exit. So how are we gonna allow here 400 homes? So we're looking at two different scales. I don't like that. So it's either we gotta do one scale for everybody, or we have no scale at all.
Mr. Chair, could I just address something quickly there? This Ralston Drive here, there is more than one route through this intersection here. So this will be provided in phase 1, but this is the final phase of the development. So the Elmwood Drive second intersection for the existing community won't be completed until this is completed. But this development in this phase 1 will have more than kind of one route through this part of the subdivision, and you can come down Pine Hill Drive. So in the first phase, there will be 2 accesses into the subdivision, but that won't alleviate the Elmwood Drive issue until phase 3.
All right, and Mr. Chair, so the difference between as of right and that, as of right, once they have that second connection, so if they connect Ralston and Pine Hill, then they don't have to do anything else in terms of exits from their subdivision. So they could continue building this subdivision and never connect to Elmwood as of right. Whereas we want them to provide that second exit to Elmwood. It's really a service to Elmwood as opposed to this development. So, you know, I guess that's one of the advantages we see of the DA here as opposed to it going as of right.
Okay, I'm lost here. I see Ralston, but can you point where is Pine Hill?
This is Beach Street here, links through to Pine Hill Drive, which comes down to
Okay. So that could be another exit. Okay. That sounds good. I thought those are 2 exits, like only Elmwood and Ralston, the 2 exits. No, that answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Rhino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see a lot of positives with this development, especially the connectivity plan and what John just explained there with Elmwood Drive. As of right, we wouldn't get that in this proposal, although it could be as much as 15 years out. But where my concerns lie is similar to the warden, is along that lot size. They're cramming and jamming as much as they can get, and I know that's business. I understand that. But what would be the average, I know it's an older subdivision, but what would be the average lot size in Elmwood and let's say along Ralston Drive and along Pine Hill? What would be the average frontage along there?
I don't have that information to hand. We could provide that at the next staff report, but generally speaking, lot sizes have been reduced over the years. So older subdivisions generally have larger lot frontages. And we have reduced those when we have amended regulations over the years. But if you wanted specifics on average lots going back, we'd have to go back and take a look at that and provide that in the next staff report.
No,
Mr.
I'd like
Chair.
an average. I would like an average just to compare the two and what it would be. You know, it's got the apartment buildings away off number trunk 2. That's another positive there, but it's got me concerned and about the lot size, about that drainage issues, especially in the area of Pine Hill Drive. And also, let's face it, these are not, where they say that there's gonna be pricing differences for different people within that buildup of over the phases. It just seems to me that I can't see them being very affordable to some of our residents out there. And that's what's got me concerned with regards to that. It's just like we're jamming and cramming and there you go. So anyway, thank you.
Okay, Councilor Rhino, Warden Rolston.
Sit down, everybody. Agree with Councilor Rhino. Kudos to the developer for making the changes that they have made, but for me, they don't go far enough. I just can't get past those tiny little road frontage lots. And I guess I would just ask the question if staff can tell me. What if the development is sold out? The engineer has retired, moved on, passed away, whatever, no longer carries professional insurance, and it's determined that, you know, this is not working. So what route does any member of the public have if they can't even come up with the money to prove that the stormwater is worse after than it was before?
Through Mr. Chair, that's something we should probably, in our next report, we can look into that and provide some more detail on, you know, what happens a year after 5, 10 years after a development is completed.
Yeah, well, that's important to me because I think I know what's going to happen. The folks are going to be left hanging, just like there are folks out there left hanging today. And that's of a concern to me. And, you know, yeah, I'm going to vote my conscience with this one, and I thank you.
All right. Seeing no one else, Deputy Warden Mitchell.
I'll move the recommended motion as presented to go to the staff
Move-
hearing.
Moved by Deputy Warden. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hibb. Get the recommendation back up.
Question.
Question has been called. Go to the vote. Signify by raising your hand and saying aye, and keep your hands up, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 9 in favor. Can I have the nays, please? Councillors Rhino, Rolston, and Councillor Garden Cole voting nay. We are scheduled for a break at 20 to 3. It is now 3:15. Do you wish to have a break?
Yes.
Okay, we will schedule a 10-minute break, returning at 3:25.